Ukraine is turning 34, and what a journey it's been. In just over 30 years, Ukraine has done what many countries take a century to achieve, winning in sports, creating new technologies, reviving its culture, and bravely defending its freedom. From Olympic medals to medical breakthroughs, old traditions to modern drones, Ukraine keeps surprising the world. And this special episode of The Gaze will celebrate the stories that define modern Ukraine. We'll take you inside the fight for sovereignty, the global wave of volunteer support, and the spirit that keeps this nation standing tall. This is the story of 34 unforgettable years, and it's just only the beginning. Ukraine is full of surprises, from the world's largest gypsum cave and Europe's deepest underground station to groundbreaking medical feats and rich cultural heritage. Despite war, Ukraine's leads in innovation, defense, and global support. Discover the incredible facts and stories behind this resilient nation in today's report.
The largest country in Europe by land area, a global breadbasket, a young state with a 1,000-year history. This is Ukraine. But did you know that? The largest gypsum cave in the world is in Ukraine's Ternopil region. The Optimistikna cave has over 260 kilometers of winding underground passages, longer than the distance from Brussels to Amsterdam. Tourists flock to see its stunning stalactites and rare helictites. The longest residential building in the world is in Lutsk, Ukraine. It's actually 40 apartment blocks joined into one complex, stretching almost 3 kilometers in length, home to around 10,000 people. The deepest metro station in Europe is Arsenalna in Kiev. Located approximately 105 meters underground, it takes about 5 minutes on 2 long escalators to reach the platforms. Europe's largest sand massif is in Ukraine. The Oleshki sands in the Kherson region cover over 175,000 hectares with dunes reaching up to 20 meters. This unique desert-like area is currently under temporary Russian occupation. Kiev's Motherland Monument is the tallest statue in Europe, taller than both Brazil's Christ the Redeemer and the Statue of Liberty in the US. In 2023, the Soviet emblem on its shield was replaced with Ukraine's national trident. Ukraine is home to 8 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, including St. Sophia Cathedral, Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, historic center of Lviv, ancient city of Chersonesus in Crimea, residence of Bukovinian and Dalmatian metropolitans, wooden churches of the Carpathians, primeval beech forests of the Carpathians, historic center of Odessa. Borscht isn't just a national dish, it's a global cultural treasure. In 2022, the tradition of cooking borscht was added to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage. Also on that list, Petrikivka painting, Koshiv painted ceramics, the Crimean Tatar ornament Ornek, and traditional Ukrainian Easter egg art, Pisankarstvo. Ukraine is one of Eurovision's most successful participants. Since 2000, only Sweden has more wins. Ukraine's gold medals came from Ruslana's Wild Dances, Jamala's 1944, and Kalush Orchestra's Stefania. It's the only country whose entries always make it to the grand final. Ukrainians have won Oscars in various film categories: costume design, music, visual effects, acting. In 2024, for the first time ever, a Ukrainian film won an Oscar. 20 Days in Mariupol, directed by Mstislav Chernov, was awarded Best Documentary Feature. It was filmed during the Russian siege of Mariupol. Ukrainian dubbing is regarded as among the best in Europe. International studios like Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and Warner Brothers praise it for its creativity, local humor, folklore, and clever wordplay. In 2004, Andriy Shevchenko became the first Ukrainian to win the Ballon d'Or. At the time, he was the star striker for AC Milan and a national football icon. Ukraine has produced world-class boxers across weight divisions. Legends like the Klitschko brothers, Vasyl Lomachenko and Oleksandr Usyk, have turned Ukraine into a boxing powerhouse. Ukraine has the world's largest reserves of black soil, Chernozem, covering around 60% of its territory. This fertile land is why it's called the breadbasket of Europe. Ukraine feeds around 400 million people in over 100 countries. It is a top global exporter of sunflower oil, wheat, corn, honey, poultry, and sugar. Only around 30 countries have their own research stations in Antarctica. Ukraine is one of them. At Akademik Vernadsky Station, scientists study weather, Earth's magnetic field, flora, and fauna. It's also home to the world's southernmost Orthodox chapel and the southernmost bar, Faraday. In 2025, Ukrainian doctors were the first in the world to implant a pacemaker in a baby by connecting it not to the heart muscle, as done previously, but to the heart's conduction system. This life-saving surgery took place in Odessa. Ukrainian surgeons at the Amasov Institute were the first to remove a shard of shrapnel from a soldier's heart without opening the chest. They did it minimally invasively, through the arm. In another world first, Kiev cardiologists performed open-heart surgery on a newborn baby just minutes after birth, immediately correcting a life-threatening defect. The medical record listed the patient's age, said Professor Ilya Yemets. He was only minutes old. The cult game series Stalker was created by Ukrainian studio GSC Game World. Set in a fictional version of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the series became a global hit. In 2024, the long-awaited Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, was released, selling over 1 million copies in its first 48 hours. Ukraine is the only country in the world to voluntarily give up its nuclear arsenal. After the USSR collapsed, Ukraine held the third largest stockpile. In 1994, Ukraine signed the Budapest Memorandum, transferring the weapons to Russia in exchange for security guarantees Russia later brazenly violated. Ukraine's modern history includes 2 revolutions. In 2004, mass protests erupted over election fraud. In 2013 to 2014, Ukrainians rose up again, this time demanding a pro-European future. The Revolution of Dignity stood against corruption, brutality, and Russian influence. Protesters faced beatings, kidnappings, and deadly violence, but ultimately prevailed. Ukraine is a recognized IT hub of Eastern Europe, known for its highly skilled tech workforce, vibrant startup ecosystem, and strong exports of IT services. Ukraine was the first country in the world to launch a fully digital government. Through the DIA app and portal, Ukrainians can access digital passports, driver's licenses, birth certificates, and register businesses, even apply for marriage and have a wedding ceremony online. United 24 is Ukraine's first large-scale global fundraising platform, launched with the support of the president and government. It brings together donors from around the world to support the military, demining, healthcare, education, and rebuilding infrastructure damaged by war. Since the 2014 Russian invasion, Ukraine's volunteer movement has become one of the largest grassroots mobilizations in the world. After the full-scale war began in 2022, volunteering became an integral part of Ukrainian national identity. Ukraine applied for EU membership just days after Russia's full-scale invasion. By June 2022, it was granted candidate status. In 2024, official accession talks began. one of the fastest moves toward EU integration in the bloc's history. During the war, Ukraine has built the world's largest coalition of international support, uniting over 50 countries providing military, financial, humanitarian, and technical aid. Kyiv has become a global symbol of unity not seen since World War II. Ukraine is the global leader in combat drone innovation and deployment. Its defense forces use UAVs for surveillance, artillery coordination, and precision strikes, including deep inside enemy territory. Ukraine is the first country in the world to officially create a dedicated branch of the military, the Unmanned Systems Forces. These include air, land, sea, and underwater drone units. Ukraine's defense industry is seeing unprecedented growth during wartime. Its production capacity is now estimated at over $35 billion. The armed forces of Ukraine are the only army in the world to have crossed into the territory of a nuclear-armed state. Ukrainian forces currently control parts of Russia's Kursk region. For over 11 years, Ukraine has resisted aggression from a nuclear power and continues to fight successfully against overwhelming odds. According to recent surveys, the core values for the vast majority of Ukrainians are freedom, security, and justice. Valeria Nekipilova, UATV News.
More than 1,000 days of relentless fight for independence. Since the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian defenders risk their lives every day for freedom and sovereignty. In an exclusive report, hear firsthand from the brave soldiers of the defense forces about their spirit, their battles against relentless enemy assaults, and what keeps them fighting. Don't miss this powerful story, brought to you by our correspondent Alona Gramova.
This is one of the training grounds in Donetsk region. Both battle-hardened servicemen and new recruits are practicing updated tactical maneuvers here to resist ongoing Russian assaults. Today's drills involve anti-tank units, whose actions are carefully coordinated by their battalion's command.
Position Zephyr, grid 8, enemy vehicle movement spotted. Eliminate.
One of the soldiers here, call sign Jaeger, is originally from Kryvyi Rih. He's been on the front lines since the very start of Russia's full-scale invasion. In February 2022, the military recruitment office initially hesitated to accept his documents due to health issues, he recalls. He was only allowed to join the fight after passing a second medical review.
They asked me, "Are you sure you won't regret it?" I said, "Of course not. We'll all regret it later if we don't go now."
In nearly 4 years of full-scale war, Jaeger has served as a mortar operator and later in air defense. He admits the pace and intensity of the war are exhausting, but that doesn't stop him from continuing to fight. Have you been in the hottest spots?
Yeah, we've been through them all. We want independence because our nation is strong and undefeated.
They are also training for scenarios involving another large-scale enemy assault, especially how to cover advancing infantry. The commander of the anti-tank battalion, call sign Falcon, says he uses these training sessions to pass on all the combat experience he's gained, in the hope it will save lives on the battlefield.
I've always had motivation. Before the war, I worked in the railways, but deep down I've always felt like a serviceman. The motivation has always been there.
Falcon himself once served as an infantryman. He knows firsthand what it's like to face the enemy on the front lines. He says that while there may not be time for holidays at the front, Ukraine's Independence Day remains deeply personal to him.
To me, Independence Day is like a birthday. You get it. I have a reason to defend my country. I grew up here. I've got nowhere else to go. This is my country, my land, my fields.
When not on combat missions, drone crews also train here at the range. Many of the fighters underwent retraining just a few months ago. Each of them came from a different military background. Take the serviceman with the call sign Monarch, monk in English. He used to fight as infantry and took part in the defense of Ivanivsky village near Bakhmut. Now, as part of a drone crew, he's continuing the fight to stop the Russian army.
Some of my comrades are from occupied territories. They've told us so many stories, and it makes me want to both defend my home and help liberate theirs. These days, Independence Day for most of us servicemen, it means wiping out the enemy. That's our main goal.
The hope of one day returning home is what keeps Shazan going. He was born in a part of Ukraine that is now under Russian occupation. That dream, he says, gives him the strength to keep fighting. Still got that fire?
Yeah, I've still got the fire in me, the focus, the rage, and the reason to keep striking back.
Ukrainian soldiers say they show their desire for independence every single day through their actions on the battlefield. Their fight for freedom under Russia's full-scale invasion has now been going on for 1,278 days. Alyona Khramova, Yevgeny Karmazin from Donetsk region, UATV News.
Even though they come from different professions, have families and lead busy lives, volunteers from all over the world haven't forgotten about the war in Ukraine. They're sending vital support, vehicles for the front lines and medical teams, humanitarian aid, medical supplies and medicines. One of the key hubs for this life-saving assistance in the city of Lviv, where everything donated is received, stored and then sent out to the most affected areas in southern and eastern Ukraine. Stay with us for an in-depth look at how this incredible effort is making a difference.
And all these people are all the people who gave money to help to pay for all of this. And that's just a little message as well in Ukrainian. And so all the ambulances are signed like this. And the drivers as well have all signed their names.
Simon lives and works as a lawyer in the UK since February 2022, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Simon and his wife have opened their home to Ukrainian refugees, but he decided he wanted to do more and became a volunteer, organising aid for those who remained in Ukraine.
Because I'm too old to fight, so I had to find some other way of helping you guys. And we had a Ukrainian family come to live with us, and we loved them very much, and that made us want to help Ukraine more. So ambulances and medical supplies seemed a good idea.
Simon began delivering ambulances to Ukraine, vital both for medical workers in frontline towns and for evacuating wounded soldiers. On one of the missions, he and his team drove over 2,000 kilometres to deliver an ambulance themselves.
I plan the route, do the logistics. It's my job to make sure we get here on time. And the drivers come from all over England. We meet in Yorkshire. We travel from Hull to Rotterdam, through Netherlands, Germany, Poland, and then into Lviv.
Simon's colleague John Fuggles co-founded the volunteer group. He says he's been married to a woman from Kiev over 20 years, and it was she who inspired him to act.
We didn't want to just sit back. So we started raising funds, and then we decided to deliver some ambulances. So it's very personal to me, to my family.
Generous Brits donated funds during charity events organised by John and his wife, funding not just ambulances but also medicine and essential medical equipment. One of the latest shipments included 8 ambulances already sent to Odessa, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Kharkiv, Sumy and Cherkasy. In total, Simon and John have already delivered 57 fully equipped vehicles.
We do fundraising events. I'm already starting to organise another fundraising dinner in September, so we will then raise some more. So it's a constant thing of raise some money, deliver some ambulances, raise some money.
British support goes beyond ambulances. Among the latest volunteers to arrive in Lviv is Alistair Caldwell, a former McLaren Formula One team manager. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, he's donated over $130,000 for Ukraine and helped buy vehicles for the armed forces.
I have a bunch of old cars, some of them are Porsches, and a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Gus, he repairs them for me. And so I see him and talk to him a lot. And he told me about his son, who had suddenly decided to take a van to Ukraine with things to help Ukraine and bring people back. And I thought this sounds like a good idea. And then he started a page where you could contribute. So I gave him a substantial donation, which nobody else had done before. He got little bits of money. So my bigger donation made a big difference. So he got a lot more money. And I sympathised with the whole idea. And then later, I sold some cars in an auction in England and got a big sum for them, £100,000.
Alistair says people in the UK understand just how important Ukraine's fight for independence and democracy is.
It means people who vote are able to decide on their own government without coercion. And so democracy is independence. The Russian Empire, for example, needs to stop trying to dominate other countries and just stick to themselves. Ukraine needs to be independent, doesn't need Russia.
One of the soldiers accepting the donated vehicles is callsign Tai, a member of the 5th Separate Assault Brigade's UAV Battalion Black Arrow. He joined Ukraine's defense forces in 2022. According to him, vehicles are a constant necessity at the front to transport ammunition and personnel.
There's a huge need for this. Right now, the most dangerous part is getting in and out of positions. That's why we need a lot of these vehicles. It's actually amazing when such legendary people get involved in helping Ukraine that they understand how important this is, not just for Ukraine, but for all of Europe.
In nearly 4 years of full-scale war, this team of British volunteers has made 46 trips to Ukraine and delivered 260 vehicles to the defense forces. Yulia Bil, Vadim Dmitriev, UATV News.
What does freedom really cost? From student hunger strikes to historic declarations, and from silent resistance to full-scale war, powerful stories, hidden struggles, and raw truths behind a nation refusing to be broken. Stay tuned, this is the story you need to hear.
Kyiv, autumn 1990. In the city center, there are hundreds of students. The posters read, "Hunger strike against the government." The protesters demand to prevent the signing of a new union treaty, to dismiss the head of the Ukrainian SSR government, to hold parliamentary elections on a multi-party basis, and to ban the conscription of Ukrainians for military service outside Ukraine. This large-scale protest would later be called the Revolution on Granite.
Of course, the greatest dream of everyone who joined the revolution on granite was the Declaration of Independence. But to say that openly at the time would have meant jeopardizing your entire future if nothing worked out. That's why the demands were more specific. The student hunger strike, that's what we called our protest, was centered on Independence Square, which, by the way, was then known as October Revolution Square. We set an example that a Ukrainian can be truly free on his own land, that he can make his own decisions and inspire others not to be afraid to stand up for this important position.
After decades of mass repressions, Ukrainians once again showed their willingness to fight for their freedom. On October 2, 1990, students from different cities of Ukraine set up dozens of tents here. On the first day of the hunger strike, 108 people declared their participation. Soon, another 50 joined them. This was an emergency not just of Republican but of union-wide scale. At first, the students were persuaded, then intimidated. It was all in vain. On October 17th, the parliament voted to fulfill most of the protesters' demands. In the early 90s, one after another, the former Soviet republics were leaving the Kremlin's orbit. On July 16, 1990, the Supreme Council of the Ukrainian SSR adopted the Declaration of State Sovereignty of Ukraine. And on August 24, 1991, the Act of Declaration of Independence of Ukraine was adopted. The blue and yellow flag was ceremoniously brought into the Ukrainian parliament for the first time. The vote for the Act of Declaration of Independence was on the verge of failing. The majority in the Supreme Council were communists. While debates continued in the chamber, thousands of people gathered in the square in front of the parliament demanding the restoration of Ukrainian independence. The chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the Ukrainian SSR, Leonid Kravchuk, put the question to a vote. At 5:55 p.m. Kyiv time, 346 deputies voted in favor.
At home, everything was fully turned on. Televisions, radios, and all available electronic devices. There was no widespread internet access like we currently have now back then. We carefully listened to every single word and keenly observed how some individuals hesitated while others did not. I truly understand how incredibly difficult it was for each and every person to make that significant decision for themselves.
On December 1, 1991, in a referendum, more than 90% of citizens supported the act adopted by the Verkhovna Rada. Such an independent and sovereign Ukraine was completely unacceptable to the Kremlin.
Putin had already shown his negative attitude toward Ukraine, literally even before he officially became president. Specifically in December 1999, right after Kuchma's victory in the elections. And everyone expected that Kuchma would make a visit to Moscow after winning the elections for the second time. Kuchma pulled off a move of multi-vector politics. He first flew to Paris, to France, and from Paris, he flew to the United States. Putin was extremely displeased by this, and he effectively imposed an embargo on energy supplies to Ukraine.
The significant conflict around Tuzla Island is often called a crucial harbinger of Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine. On September 29, 2003, Moscow, without any prior warning, began constructing a substantial dam from its Taman Peninsula directly toward Ukraine's Tuzla Island. The Ukrainian military warned if the border was violated, they would open fire to kill. Russia did not respond. Leonid Kuchma, the president of Ukraine, interrupted his visit to Latin America and arrived on the island. The Russian builders had only 102 meters of the dam left to construct. For several weeks, Putin avoided speaking with Kuchma, but after receiving a call from the island, which was ready for defense, he gave the order to halt construction. The relative calm in relations between Russia and Ukraine did not last long. Just a year later, in the fall of 2004, large-scale protests began in Kyiv and later in other major cities of the country, triggered by massive fraud in the presidential elections, where Viktor Yanukovych, the Kremlin's protégé, was declared the winner. The exact number of participants in the Orange Revolution is unknown. Experts estimate the number in the hundreds of thousands. The Kremlin launched a full-scale disinformation campaign in Ukraine.
Back then, Russia possessed indeed a very significant economic influence over Ukraine, as well as a considerable and pervasive influence over the media, specifically newspapers and various forms of mass media. By the year 2004, numerous branches of major Russian newspapers and their associated websites had successfully opened and firmly established themselves within Ukraine. Well, and of course, this significant development came as quite a surprise to Moscow. Moscow subsequently pressured Kuchma to forcefully disperse the Orange Maidan by means of significant and decisive force. That's right. But Kuchma realized that this situation could also end very badly for him.
Viktor Yushchenko emerged victorious. But in 2010, at the next elections, pro-Russian forces in Ukraine managed to take revenge. Viktor Yanukovych assumed the post of head of state. The country's foreign policy changed direction. Yanukovych declared Moscow the main ally and partner. The last straw was the government's refusal to sign the association agreement with the European Union. And once again, it was the students who were the first to protest. The night of November 29th to 30th, 2013 became a turning point in Ukrainian history. The protesters were forcefully dispersed by Berkut units. Ukrainians responded to the repression with a massive uprising. The revolution of dignity began. In the last days of February, it became known that amid the mass protests, Yanukovych had fled the country to Russia. The Verkhovna Rada stripped him of his powers, and in February of 2014, Vladimir Putin gave the order to launch the military operation to seize Crimea. Real power on the peninsula was swiftly seized by armed men in military uniforms without insignia, the so-called Little Green Men.
Glory to Ukraine, forever.
Despite mass protests by local residents against the annexation of Crimea by Russia, the Kremlin held a sham referendum and declared the peninsula its own.
Ukraine became, for Vladimir Putin, something of an absolute idée fixe. That is to say, he very much wanted to punish her, yes. And we clearly saw this in the deliberate stoking of anti-NATO sentiment, and we also saw it quite distinctly in the significant gas war that occurred between 2008 and 2009. Please introduce yourself. I can't introduce myself. Why? Because it's not allowed.
If, for example, we truly talk about the Crimean Tatars, then 95, if not indeed 99% of them firmly supported the integrity of Ukraine, as was shown in 2014, starting with the crucial rally on February 26 and continuing to this present day. That is, the Crimean Tatars, continue to suffer for their principled position.
Immediately after Russia occupied the peninsula, mass repressions began in Crimea. Russian security forces kidnapped and arrested those who were against the annexation. People were often persecuted on the basis of their ethnicity. The victims of Russian repressions were the Crimean Tatars. Tens of thousands were forced to leave their homes. Among them was Ismail Kurtumer.
First of all, I was born and raised in Ukraine. I don't know any other country. This is my homeland, my land. And secondly, I didn't want to live under Russian rule, that's for sure. Well, we can certainly start with the significant and undeniable fact that I am indeed a Crimean Tatar, yes. And let's put it this way, I personally didn't experience it myself, but my beloved grandparents, yes, they still vividly remembered the incredibly difficult and traumatic deportation. That is absolutely and unequivocally right. And they told me about it. I learned about it from people who lived through it. It may sound trivial, but at the very least, what actually happened in 2014 was profoundly and undeniably unjust. And I personally felt that injustice very deeply, to my core. Let's put it this way, I longed for justice.
The date considered the start of Russia's armed aggression in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions is April 12th, when dozens of militants with Russian citizenship seized administrative buildings in Sloviansk. Everything was following the well-worn Crimean scenario, a forceful seizure of power and pseudo-referendums. Kyiv announced the start of an anti-terrorist operation.
In 2014, several factors came together here. For Putin, again, it was the fear that he would once again suffer defeat in Ukraine, that Ukraine would finally slip out of his grasp embrace. That's it. And I think that he was already prepared in 2014 for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
After 8 long years of fighting in certain specific areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Moscow then began a new significant stage of the war. Russia subsequently launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This time, Russia clearly wanted more, to completely destroy Ukraine as a sovereign state. The main target of the aggressor in February 2022 was Kyiv.
I met that very day in the beautiful Carpathian Mountains. It was my vacation. It was 2 days of hell getting to Kyiv. All the roads were just jammed with traffic. It was impossible to even head in the direction of Kyiv. Cars were lined up on the opposite lanes, 2, 3, even 4 rows deep. Sometimes we made our way along the shoulders. I had already heard that the enemy was near Demidov. The enemy was near Irpin. I believed I would be useful here, both for myself and for others.
Before the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, Trofim Ivanov worked in the city council of Vyshhorod, Kyiv region. In the first weeks of the war, like tens of thousands of Ukrainians, he became a volunteer.
And then it truly felt like a perpetual Groundhog Day scenario. It was a constant 24-hour job. There was no bread in the city, there was no fuel. All the stores were closed. There were provocateurs, explosions could be heard, something was burning somewhere. It was non-stop work, 24/7, negotiations everywhere for humanitarian aid for the city and so on.
When the Ukrainian armed forces drove the Russian army out of the Kyiv region, Trofim decided to join the National Guard of Ukraine.
I was exempt. I was exempted by the Vyshhorod City Council until the end of the war. But I made the decision on my own that I wanted to serve specifically in the National Guard of Ukraine. I passed the medical commission and enlisted as a regular soldier.
Ukrainians did not greet the Russian army with bread and salt, but instead with mass resistance.
Shame, 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 shame. Shame.
Putin's blitzkrieg failed. Russia became completely bogged down in the war against Ukraine. Millions of losses and a crisis in the Russian economy, international isolation, the status of a pariah, an executioner and a criminal. The Russian dictator still cannot come to terms with the fact that he will not be able to occupy all of Ukraine and take from Ukrainians what they value most, their freedom and independence.
For me, the profound independence of our beloved country is truly what many generations of Ukrainians have long dreamed of achieving. What was nurtured as a dream and what I managed to turn into reality together with my friends and the people with whom I live in the same era is something very, very personal.
For me, independence is above all the truly fundamental freedom of my children in their own cherished homeland. I'm not even talking about them being able to move around freely. And when they can live on their own land, make decisions on their own land, influence the development of their own country.
For me, probably first and foremost, it's the profound and fundamental ability to think freely, to speak freely and openly. That's precisely what I truly and deeply feel here. Yes, exactly. And, well, to act freely and independently as well.
In the territories temporarily occupied by Russia, underground fighters and partisans continue to risk their lives fighting for Ukraine's freedom. The defense forces are destroying the enemy not only in Ukraine, but also deep within Russian territory. Ukrainians are fighting, working, and studying, and most importantly, they continue to live and love on their own land, in their independent Ukraine. Larisa Petruk, Ruslan Belozerov, Dmitro Pok, and Alexander Khan for Freedom TV channel.
I urge you to join the fight for freedom and sovereignty. Subscribe to our channel and stay tuned to what is happening in the world, presenting from Ukrainian perspective. Hope to see you very soon. Stay tuned. Goodbye.